Welcome, everyone. So, my guest today is Marko, co founder and CEO of Lynxcraft. It's a company using AI to completely change the way homes are designed and built. So, Marko is a serial entrepreneur who's launched several successful ventures, and now he's bringing the same mindset to one of the oldest industries in the world, and that's construction, and reimagining it through automation and smart technology. So, Marko, welcome to the Growth Diary.
Glad to be here.
So you said that homes are becoming more like products similar to cars or electronics. When did that idea first come to you, and what gap in construction world were you trying to fill with Lynxcraft?
So the idea is about 2 years old. My co-founder and I were working in an investment project. It's a bigger project where they wanted to put up a mill, a production site for timber buildings and so on. And the idea popped up then, and then later on we developed it. And it actually comes out from the idea that construction is corrupt as is, not in a way that corrupt in a way that we don't have any standardization. The standardization ends on a level of material. And this means that each building that we build is actually a prototype. Comparing this to a car, if we would build cars like we do buildings, we would put together, 10 top-notch engineers. They would make a car, and the car would work, but this car would be awful at the end too, because there is no actual standardization. This is how we build all the buildings now. They are designed from scratch and built from scratch each time. And even if we made the same building many times, each version would be better, actually. We see that standardization really brings quality. And it's the same with the design process. And this is actually how we started. We started with the technology. It's a algorithmic building system with finite number of building blocks. And we proved if we can make buildings like this, we can produce them first, and then save a lot of time and money. We went to housing producers and we presented the technology, and they gave us all the nods. So they said, sure, we can save a lot of time and money, but for them, it was too risky. They would need to change their production lines. They would need to invest a lot of money, and we couldn't come through. So then we said, if we want to change construction, we should not go through supply chain, but we have to go through the demand side. So that's when actually the fun thing started to happen, the software, but actually the same technology is behind the software as well. So when you're talking about when finite number of building blocks, when walls come together, kit of parts, not only in the hardware part, but in the software part as well, we've proven that with 19, for example, with 19 Legos, as we call them, we can produce, so putting them in an algorithm, we can produce billions of different floor plans and house shapes. And we can do that on the software level as well, which means that on the design process. And this is now where we started to really change the way we do stuff, first on the software part, but our long-term vision is to have actually cover the whole supply chain.
So, I mean, I think we can agree that construction is one of the slowest industries to modernize. Um,
Yeah.
Not sure why it's taking so long, but why do you think change has taken so long? What kind of resistance have you faced sort of bringing tech into construction?
Yeah. So we know this is public data that construction is one of the least digitized industries. I think only agriculture is worse. And even when talking about added value, it's awful. In the past 70 years, I think it's the only major industry where the added value has dropped, not increased. And digital adoption is slow, I think, due to complexity in general. So we have so many different things. We have so many materials, so many systems, so many stakeholders, and we have the physical world, which makes things even harder. For example, land, right? And this is where it's very obvious that in order to make real change, because a lot of people have tried, you need to change the baseline system. You need to change the fundamentals. So, for example, we know that modular construction is a term known for more than 100 years. There are dozens of systems that were introduced, but none of them were really, really mass adopted. Even today, new companies are being formed and bankrupt. In the UK, I don't know, in the past 5 years, we've got, 5 bankruptcies of big companies doing modular. So this tells us that we need to change something else. And that's why we think that our system is a bit more pragmatic. That's why we use walls, not volumetric, for example. So not bottom up to change the supply chain, but top to bottom so that the users will demand the change. And this is what will change the mindset.
Lynxcraft uses AI and machine learning for zoning, design, cost automation. Can you explain how those systems work together and what's been the hardest part for making that all run smoothly for you?
Sure. So when you talk about AI, AI is the most wide term. Then you can divided to machine learning, and then even talking about LLMs. LLMs are, let's say, the smallest part of AI. So we're using LLMs when it comes to plot information. So we're taking all the public information about plots, putting it into an LLM, and it's not that easy as putting a document into ChatGPT and it gives you an answer, because these answers are very, very often not exact, especially when these documents are vast. When we're talking about hundreds of pages long documents, the ChatGPT really starts hallucinating. So we're using LLMs, which is quite a challenge because you need to vectorize the data, you need to prepare it and so on, and then you need to test it. And when it comes to design, this is what we're developing as we speak. It's a machine learning system where we are combining our algorithmic system of finite building blocks and AI machine learning, which come together very perfectly, because when you have an algorithm with certain rules, you can combine it greatly with AI, which means that the generation of floor plans and house shapes are automatic. They come from rules and not, and actually the first results are great. So when it comes to designing, when the design and zoning, the big problem are just fragmented rules, but there are positive sides. For example, the whole Europe is based on Eurocode, which means that about 80% of everything is very mutual, is the same. But the problem is that the rest of 20% is really fragmented, right? And the second big issue that we have is just the availability of data, which means that sources are scattered, sometimes hidden when it comes to plot information or just land information or different types of info that we need. So it really depends. Some countries, for example, have everything public, everything accessible. Some countries don't. And then we're combining this data.
You mentioned before that your one of your biggest challenges right now is managing sort of product complexity and growing a developer team. So how are you scaling the company right now while keeping the quality and innovation strong?
Their bandwidth is limited due to the problem I mentioned in the beginning, due to customization, due to low standardization, right? So additionally, the main problem, additional problem that they have is workforce. So the number one problem in the world when it comes to construction is workforce, but not any kind of workforce, mostly workforce that needs to do stuff on site, right? Which means that it's not only a problem now that this workforce is becoming expensive. There is none. No one wants to work on site anymore, right? So we have this third country workers now coming, but there are big problems there, cultural, knowledge base, other. So these are all of the questions that we're trying to solve. So with standardization and turning a house into a product, so productivization of a house, which is a concept that it's not ours, but we're trying to make it alive, right? So scalability for us is not limited, let's say, since we have thousands of contractors to work with at any moment, right? But to pick who to work with. And in the future, we know we're going to work with those who understand our philosophy and technology, and through them we'll be even more competitive, because these kind of, let's say, contractors, housing producers, however we call them, are emerging more and more. And I think this is the future of construction in general. So turning house into a product, turning house into a let's say parts of the house into a standardized building blocks, however they're shaped or formed, just not the standardization as we have today on the level of the material, which is not enough.
Can you see lots of other construction companies like yourself who are coming into the space? Do you feel like there's going to be a lot of competitors, as people see that this is clearly the way to go?
Yes, in both worlds, in the hardware world and software world. Of course, we already have competitors that are similar to us. Of course, they address a bit different niches as we do, But yes, I think in terms of construction tech, there's going to be loads of different new types of companies, not only startups, but other companies as well, because they emerge from serious companies also, and they become scale-ups immediately. So we already see a lot of companies emerging here, all from building designers to supply chain optimizers, but also companies that embed the entire process, so software and hardware in one. Those are companies that have a lot more capital
Yeah.
background.
Yeah. So, in terms of expansion, you're looking to expand from Central Europe into the UK and US as well. How do the rules and regulations different? How does that change the way you plan to launch in each region?
So yeah, as I mentioned before, when you look at Europe, it's great that we have Eurocode, and it's the same in the US. They have their own like nationwide code. This is great. Otherwise, we would really be in trouble. But even when you walk around anywhere in the Western world, you see that the buildings are sort of similar. Even the floor plans are similar. Of course, they're different in shapes, in the way we live, and so on. But when you look at static, when you look at I don't know, different rules. Actually, we live in similar buildings because we have similar needs. Everyone needs a kitchen, everyone needs a living room, everyone needs a place to sleep, a bathroom, and so on. So, and the 20%, the rest is really, really fragmented. And this is the hard part. It's not only fragmented nation-wise, but region-wise and sometimes city-wise, right? So, in this case, we know that we cannot solve 100% of the problem. And this is something that we really needed to tell ourselves. We can. Actually, for now, it looks like no one can, but we don't need to because we have a human in the loop process. So there is a part of the process that's now being solved by machine or AI or whatever we call it. But then it's important, since there are so many variables, that a human, for example, an architect or engineer, checks it. So sort of the engineers are becoming revisers, or the architects can spend much more time doing designs and less time doing the administrative work, and the same with engineers. So the repetitive jobs are being taken out. And when it comes to Europe, Central Europe is similar. For example, we have this, it's similar as it with law. We have the Germanic, let's say, regions. And when you look at US and UK, they're more similar. For example, even when we talk about land or plot information, you have more a textual system. And when you look at Germanic, so Central European, it's more of a visual map system. But this is changing. Everything is actually becoming digitized. And this wave of digitization is actually helping us a lot. Even there are a lot of European projects that want to put everything on the same common denominator. All the land data, all the zoning data, all the regulations, and so on.
In terms of growth and funding, what's been, would you say, the biggest lesson you found so far in juggling like fundraising, product development, and international growth?
So as any startup, we're grinding. Of course, it's a difficult path the past 2 years, but we were quite successful. So as founders at the beginning, because our stories was so futuristic, we had to put in our own funds, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Secondly, since we are in Europe, there were some upsides because our story has a few things that clicks with European calls and tenders. So, for example, we're talking about housing crisis, we're talking about sustainability issue, and we're talking about digitization, and we have our own patent pending. And this means that we were able to get some of the grants, which was very positive. Otherwise, we got some equity investments as well, so 500,000 until now. And we're actually doing revenue since we're doing already lots of projects in Central Europe now. So it's sort of a combo. But we know that in the next year, in 2026, we're gonna fundraise again. Not because we really need it, but we want to grow much faster. Otherwise, let's say new incumbents will be faster than us. Because
Yeah.
the biggest enemy of startup is always time.
What do you think construction will look like as a whole, given what's happening in the world right now with technology?
Yeah, construction will be, on the first glance, it looks similar. So one of the things that will definitely happen is on the easy part, which means the easy part, saying it lightly, everything will become digitized. So for example, the BIM system and the whole design part will be digitized. This is one thing which is great, and everything will be faster and easier. But when it comes to hardware, the most important thing is, of course, prefabrication combined with standardization. And we see not only in timber, we see in other materials, concrete and even other materials, that it's the same path everywhere. Everyone wants to make standards, and everyone wants to prefabricate as much as possible, because of you have two big impacts. One is workforce, as I mentioned, but the other is also quality, because then you produce house in a controlled environment, and then you just take it there. And when you combine, you have to combine both software and hardware part, because of the complexity of certain systems. So for example, when you're talking about the architectural part, this part is easy. But when you're talking about MEP, then it becomes really difficult. How to prefabricate those? We already have systems, we already have ideas, but to do that on a massive scale and to keep design options vast as we want them, this is the difficult part, but of course solvable. So we're gonna turn construction into what we now know as automobile industry in sort of a way.
Well, Marco, thanks so much for sharing those insights. It's clear that you're pushing boundaries with what you're doing there at Lynxcraft. So I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was glad talking to you anytime.